Thanks, Jarrell. I want to welcome everyone again to Angelique Power's talk on the death of equity, part of today's convention theme of relief and recovery. As Jarrell said, there will be designated time at the end of this session for Q&A. Angelique can answer questions from the Q&A box, so please add your questions in there if you have them during the time. If there's any questions that you do like, as Jarrell mentioned, you can upvote them by clicking the thumbs up bar. You may also utilize the chat box throughout the session to share with one another if anything resonates with you and you want to share with us, with each other. So on behalf of Americans for the Arts, let's begin. I'll hand things off over to Angelique Power, the president of the Field Foundation.
Thank you, Jarrell. Thank you, Nikki. This year at AFTA, we begin each session with a land acknowledgement. And I've sought counsel from some of my Native friends in town. And first I want to acknowledge the complexity of me, a non-Native person, doing a land acknowledgement. I've been educated that in doing so, I'm still upholding a system of marginalizing Native voices. Additionally, this is an acknowledgement of land at one point in time. Often in Native life, time is circular instead of linear, and the past and the future and contemporary times are in fact linked. Land acknowledgements don't always take into consideration Native people's viewpoints and their ways of seeing and being, and don't always keep in mind Native people's ways of interacting with the land itself. In Chicago, land is so communal that it's difficult to assign it to certain tribes over others, as there are many tribes that have lived and loved on this land. In acknowledging some, we inevitably leave others out. That said, I was given encouragement to both share the complexity of doing land acknowledgements, but was also, given encouragement to move forward as best that I can. I was told it's gloriously important to affirm that Native people were and are still here. And in fact, we often, even within our own racial justice movement, invisibilize Native voices, and it's so critical to actually center them in the reimagining of the world that we're doing right now. I was also told that hearing the names of tribes, of the original inhabitants of land, actually allows the land to heal. So let us not speak about one moment in time. Let us bring this forward. I am sitting on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires. That is the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi. And in addition to that, there are several other tribes that have also called this land their home, including the Maami, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Peoria, the Sac, and the Fox. And so this land sits on water, Lake Michigan, and it is actually this original highway that connects folks without borders. And in many ways, it explains the way that we are in Chicago, that we connect across perceived boundaries, that we are constantly in the state of movement building, and that this reflects yesterday, it reflects today, and it reflects tomorrow. Over 1 billion children that are now learning remotely, my daughter Sadie is one of them. That 42 million people out of work, my husband Sean is one of them. The over 2 million people infected and over 100,000 lives now gone from coronavirus in the United States alone. Warren Fairweather, Lisa Greenwood, Erica Lopez, Caitlin Strokosh, Clarita and Domingo Nunez. These are real people that I know, some that I love dearly, who have fallen ill or who have passed away in the last few months due to this very real virus. And yet my family is lucky. We are the privileged. We're able to stay home with one income now in our household. We are able to help our daughter with her school day lessons, given in the same language that we speak in our home. We're able to make an appointment with a therapist, which I do every other Thursday, and pay for mostly through health insurance I get through my job. And I talk through my worries for a child who's having nightmares almost nightly. I talk through the images I can't seem to get out of my head of black necks being crushed calmly by white knees, of white voices tremoring with false fear on the line with police, calling in another hit on blackness, performing fear, while brazenly showing that whiteness will always be believed, even when it's breaking the rules in plain sight. Whiteness will always be at home, wherever it is. Home. I am talking to you from my home. My daughter is somewhere in the house, likely on the Roblox app, and my husband is somewhere in the house, likely yelling at her to get off the Roblox app. Home. Working from home for me means zooming into other people's spaces, day in, day out, talking through ideas while the moving wallpaper of their lives happens around them. Their kids, their pets, their art as punctuation, the xylophone of bookshelves behind them. Home means ending these all-day Zoom meetings and then stretching my body, bent like a question mark, over this laptop as I rise from a chair never meant for hunkering over a laptop all day. I walk 10 steps from work zone to mom and wife zone, and I start straightening and cooking, checking in and worrying about a child's sedentary life in quarantine. Home means freezing time with that 10-year-old daughter, whose real learning is happening at lightning speed outside of Google Meet classrooms, with live, carefree interactions with other children, now indefinitely on pause. My daughter is sifting through all the overlapping moments that came before coronavirus. She reaches into her mind and pulls out a memory, like a carefully wrapped ornament. And then together, she unwraps this memory and we look at it from all sides. That moment on the bus, in the school bathroom, at day camp before lunch. We unwrap and we hold this memory, and then it sparks memories of my own. And so I reach into my mind and I pull my own ornament out. And I talk to her about growing up in the 70s with no seatbelts and grown-ups in the backyard listening to jazz and playing dominoes. And we swap memory ornament for memory ornament, filling up this home. Home is where I close the door in this room and tune in every weekday to the television of Zoom. Dressed to the nines, but barefoot and wearing no makeup, always keeping my camera on so people know that I am here, I'm here, I'm here. Maybe it's because I'm at home that the unease starts to churn in my stomach. And maybe it's because I know people personally who have fallen ill or who have passed away due to the virus. And maybe it's because I don't know when my husband will work again. And maybe it was that white woman's voice on the phone with police, the dog whimpering as his noose was casually tightened, the brazenness of the gang of police officers murdering in plain sight, the fact that each of these moments are being ornamentalized inside of me, or worse, inside of my baby girl. Maybe it's the wall of ancestors behind me who have seen the lynchings, who have been the lynched. Maybe it's the stories that my father, a Black Chicago police officer, told us growing up. Never check the box on your license that says you'll be an organ donor, because ER doctors don't save Black bodies, they harvest them. Or when he would tell us, should the house catch on fire, don't call the firemen, because they loot Black homes after they put the fire out. Or how my parents would tell us, never forget to vote, but do not mistake your vote for freedom. That needs to be fought for every day inside of Google Meet classrooms and on Zoom calls, without ever seeming like you're fighting. Know more than others, but never show you know more than others. Note those elegant dismissals of your intellect and your ideas like you are Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly. Sting like a bee. But at some point, home, during week 14 and day 90 something of quarantine, I realized I've been watching the Equity channel on my Zoom TV. And much like the Bravo channel, you cannot believe the hype. I have in fact been binge watching on Real Housewives of Equity, where everybody spins and proclaims their commitment to ensuring equity. And then the same scenes roll, the same drama plays out. And in the end, nothing happens. Nothing changes. 4 years ago, when I started at the Field Foundation, it was scary to use the word racial equity. It signaled change and shifting of power and resources. It was scary to put our board and staff through racial justice training, and to be clear, we would move our resources to funding locally sourced power, meaning organizers of color in communities of color, meaning funding artists of color as individuals, meaning funding for-profit media organizations of color, meaning ensuring our board was not only 80% folks of color and our staff 75%, but that the community around us helped to design the grant making, meaning changing our investments to have racial equity and socially responsible investing as the frame. And then, after the latest lynching was captured on an iPhone, suddenly, racial equity became an accessory, a pashmina of a line in each emailed statement, often paired with systemic racism and anti-Blackness and racial justice as accoutrement. And yet the pieces that make these words meaningful were missing. Equity is action. It is accountability. It is acknowledging history and the harm your organization has done and continues to do. It's showing receipts, showing where your dollars are going, where the power lines are inside of your organization and how they might be shifting. But equity as a statement, an accessory, rather than a word that actually should create fear, it's being used right now as a badge. And that is the death of the term equity. Now, those who know me well, and there are several of you who are tuning in that do know me very well, you know that I am something of an equity cheerleader. I have proclaimed its import for nearly 8 years now. I've gone to great lengths to always explain what it actually means, that it's different, that it's not about representation, but it's about power, it's about resources, it's about those being impacted as designers, not targets of benevolence. And always assuming that this is the reason equity isn't happening. People must not know what it means. I will use restaurant analogies. I will create PowerPoints. I will make it plain and direct. I will try to walk it and show it. I'll go as far into the weeds as you'd like me to go to show how it manifests in practice and not just in concept. I will show you how I mess this up, but how I keep trying, how I keep listening, how I keep learning. But at some point, during week 14 and day 90 something of quarantine, I finally get it. I get it. It isn't that equity isn't clear. It's that equity isn't welcome. Equity doesn't require patience. It requires revolution. It isn't about following rules and asking nicely and showing up smiling, dressed to the nines, saying, I am here, I am here, I am here. It's about burning it all down. Kicking the Karens out who are co-opting the word equity. Being very clear, we will not be dismissed because you refuse to understand. And while you protect what's yours and speak our language to cloak your inaction, while you sit sheltered and protective of your place, we are about to make this whole world feel like ours. So mark my words, mark them good. When we reopen, every place will be our home. We will know each other not by our words, but by our actions. We will see the electricity of new power lines being laid. We will track each cent and hold every equity statement making organization accountable for how we are putting our money where our mouths are. We will create intentional memory ornaments for ourselves and our friends and our children and our grandchildren that are filled with joy and abundance and possibility. Does it feel like home for everyone? That will be the barometer. The rest, trust me, it's just commentary. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. That was incredibly powerful. And from what I'm seeing in the chat, everyone is resonating so much with that. Folks, as a reminder, if you do have any questions for Angelique, you're welcome to put them into the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom bar of your screen, Q&A, at this time. I guess I'll start things off. What has been conversations within your organization, the challenges that you've come against as we talk through these equity statements, and the kind of combativeness or defensiveness that some folks often get to? What have been those conversations within your organization, and how have you dealt with them?
Well, I will say about the Field Foundation, this is not a new conversation that we had. This is a journey we've been on for, years. But I will say that within the philanthropic community, I think there is still a misunderstanding that when you are working on racial justice, you are centering the voices of visionaries, which I hate to say it, but it's not us. It's organizers, it's folks of color, it's artists, it's people who have more proximity to the questions of our day. And so even if you take, for example, a conversation that's happening now around police, there's such a misunderstanding about what defund police and what abolition means. And there are so many assumptions being made rather than actually centering organizers who have been talking about this for a really long time and taking the posture of listening and learning. To practice equity is to actually not inject your thinking on a situation, but to center those that are more proximate and to have a seat and listen to what they say. So you can't be about racial justice, but then think that this conversation about defunding police and investing in communities instead and exploring an abolitionist framework, well, that's a little much. It is a posture that you take on a daily basis of learning and listening.
Absolutely. There's
And I
one
will
question.
say something else. I mean, I don't know if there are more questions in the
Go ahead.
chat, but I will say, we're watching this incredible reckoning happening in the arts right now. And we're seeing it nationally, and we're certainly seeing it in Chicago. And I think it's fascinating to see these power lines being redrawn. You are watching these institutions come to their knees. And it isn't because high-end donors have made decisions around, what's important, or curatorial authority has, led the day. It is because of artists, and mainly artists of color. And it's because of employees, and mainly employees of color. It's because of social media and democratized platforms. Power is being restated and redefined right now, which has been fascinating to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one question from attendee saying, I've seen a lot of pushback against these big Black Lives Matter murals on city streets, especially if they are commissioned by city officials. If they're created by community without city authority, do they deserve the same pushback, and have these big statement murals lost their bite?
I'm sorry. I was like reading all this love in the chat, and I kind of got swept away and was like, oh my gosh, I want to tell people I love them too. I'm so sorry. Will you repeat the question?
Sure. It's a conversation about the Black Lives Matter murals that are coming up on a bunch of city streets. And some are being commissioned by city officials, and some are being created by the community. And so there's pushback about them. Do you think that the ones that are created by the community deserve the same pushback as the one that are created by city officials? And do these mural statements have significance? Have they lost their bite, or is it too much at this point?
It's such an interesting question, because it really is like, who codifies what is art, and who codifies whose voice is legitimate? And, it is this curatorial authority. Like, it's about Black lives mattering. And whether you are in the public sector or whether you are an individual and you pick up a pen and you put it on a monument that, should never have actually been put up, I don't feel like I'm in a position to say who has a right to say it and who has a right to not say it. We're in this moment of rethinking who has the voice. And actually, it's long overdue to hear voices from people that have no institution behind them. So.
Preach. So we have one question here. How can a white arts leader trying to make true change seem authentic in an environment of mistrust in a highly segregated community?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I want to be very clear that I think it's important to have white people in this and doing this work. And I think that it's work that needs to be done. It is a constant evaluation that each of us do, you know, on a daily basis of figuring out when do we step forward and when do we step back? When do we lift voices and when do we use our bodies as protection? These are newer questions for white people in this mix, but these are questions that folks of color ask themselves every day in every, you know, office situation and in personal and social situations that we're in. And so there is 100% a role for white people in this and actually doing some of the intentional work, whether that's anti-racism training, whether that's caucusing by race with other people. I would say, please continue to do the work. It's important and we need you, but we can't solve it for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we're pretty much right at time, and I'll apologize ahead of time for folks that questions we didn't get around to, because this is such a short session, but thank you so much, Angelique, for your openness and willingness to share. It's been, you know, really impactful on me as I kind of go through work with Americans for the Arts, so I appreciate that. I will turn things back over to Jarrell Jenkins to close us out for the day. Thank everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you in other sessions.